Hayes walked through the cold, steel corridors of station with the heavy step of a man who had seen too much. 15 years of work in the research division had worn him down, but it was not the work itself that troubled him. It was what he had discovered 3 weeks ago that kept him awake at night. He moved past the security checkpoints without looking at the guards. They knew him. Everyone on the station knew Hayes, the quiet scientist who spent more time with data files than with people. Nobody suspected that he was walking toward the most dangerous being in known space. The containment chamber sat at the lowest level of station. It was a massive underground vault, shielded with crystalline barriers that hummed with power. The walls were thick enough to survive a nuclear blast. The security was supposed to be absolute. Nothing had ever escaped from this chamber. Nothing ever would. But knew the truth. Something was held here that should not be held anywhere. He keyed in his access code at the observation window. The glass became transparent, revealing the chamber beyond. His breath caught, as it did every time he came here. The dragon lay on the cold floor, its massive body twisted in a position that suggested pain. That was the name given to the creature in the old records, though doubted anyone had called it that in 300 years. The dragon was enormous, easily 30 meters long when it stood. Its scales were a deep blue-green color, like the ocean on a world had never seen. Right now, those scales were dull and lifeless. Chains bound the dragon, not ordinary chains, but technological restraints that glowed with an eerie red light. They wrapped around the creature's neck, its wings, its legs. The chains were designed to suppress strength while maximizing suffering. Had studied the specifications. Every detail was calculated to cause maximum psychological pain. The dragon moved its head, one enormous eye opened, golden and ancient. It looked at through the transparent barrier. The eye held intelligence, it held awareness, it held desperation. Pressed his hand against the glass. The dragon had seen him before. Every night for the past 3 weeks had come to this window. Every night the dragon watched him, had stopped trying to understand why. He only knew that something in those ancient eyes called to him. "You should not be here." He turned quickly. Doctor stood behind him, her dark eyes filled with worry. She was a brilliant neurologist who had worked with for 7 years. She was also his only real friend on station. "I could say the same to you," replied. Stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The security logs show you have been coming to this chamber every night. The administrators are starting to ask questions. Commander Cross specifically asked me if you were behaving strangely." Felt his jaw tighten. Commander Cross was the station administrator, a rigid man who believed that rules existed to be followed without question. He was also the type of man who would report a colleague without hesitation. "I am just conducting research," said. It was not entirely a lie. "No, you are conducting something else." Looked at the dragon through the window, her expression changed. She had trained herself not to see the dragon as anything but a dangerous specimen, but right now saw something different in her face. He saw doubt. "That creature has been imprisoned for 300 years, continued. "The Galactic Council deemed it too dangerous to exist in freedom. We do not have the authority to question that decision." "The Council made many decisions that were wrong," said quietly. His eyes widened slightly. "Be careful what you say. Words like that can get you removed from this station." Knew she was right. The Galactic Council tolerated no dissent. Humans were still new to the larger civilization, barely trusted. If a human began to show disloyalty to Council authority, he would be removed from his position and likely imprisoned on some distant planet. But was past caring about his career. He had discovered the truth by accident. He had been reviewing old records, medical data that was supposed to be sealed. The files showed that 3 centuries ago had not been a conqueror. The dragon had been defending it from Council expansion. It had fought to protect its people. The Council, unable to defeat it in honest battle, had captured it through deception and imprisoned it as punishment. For 300 years, the creature had suffered. For 300 years, the greatest living dragon in known space had been locked in a box, its strength slowly draining away, its body deteriorating. And the Galactic Council had been content to let it die slowly, forgotten in the dark. Had read every record he could find about the dragon. He had studied its physiology, its history, its biology. The chains were not just physical restraints. They were designed to suppress the dragon's ability to use its legendary strength. More than that, they were designed to cause psychological suffering. Every day, the dragon knew it was imprisoned. Every day, it felt its power being stolen from it. "I am finished with ignoring injustice," said Tu. "I spent 15 years pretending that the Galactic Council's decisions were correct. I spent 15 years accepting that some beings deserve to suffer in chains. I cannot do that anymore." His face went pale. "What are you saying?" Before could answer, the dragon moved. Its massive head lifted from the ground. The chains rattled with the movement, but the beast did not stand. Instead, it turned its golden eye directly toward and made a sound. It was a low-frequency pulse, so deep that felt it vibrate through his bones. The sound carried meaning. Did not know how he understood it, but he did. The dragon was not screaming in pain or rage. The dragon was reaching out. The dragon was saying something that heard clearly in his mind. "Help me!" Grabbed Sarm. "We need to leave this place. We need to leave now." But did not move. He stared at the dragon, at the ancient creature that had done nothing except defend its own people. He stared at the chains that held it. He stared at the future, suddenly clear before him. The maintenance tunnels beneath station were dark and empty, moved through them with careful steps, his hand on the cold metal wall to guide himself. He carried a small light device that cast only a dim glow. Bright light would trigger the security sensors that monitored the lower levels. 3 days had passed since his confrontation with. 3 days of acting normal, of going to his workstation, of pretending that nothing had changed. 3 days of preparing. Had spent those days obtaining what he needed. He had accessed technical specifications for the containment system. He had studied every schematic, every circuit diagram, every piece of information about how the chains worked. The knowledge was not easy to find. The Galactic Council kept such information locked away, but had friends in unexpected places. He had discovered an underground network of xenophils, humans and other species who believed that the Galactic Council's authority was not absolute. They did not believe that beings should be imprisoned forever simply because they were dangerous or because they refused to bow to council power. These rebels, as they called themselves, had provided him with technical data that was not supposed to exist outside of council headquarters. The chains, had learned, worked on a principle of suppression rather than simple physical restraint. They generated a field that prevented the dragon from accessing its legendary strength. The field was powered by a reactor deep beneath the containment chamber. If the reactor was shut down, the field would collapse. The chains themselves were mechanical and could be opened by anyone with the right knowledge. But there was a problem. The chains were not independent. They were all connected to a master control system. If tried to open them one at a time, the system would detect the change and trigger emergency protocols. Guards would arrive within minutes. The containment chamber would seal. Everything would fail. The only way to do this was to shut down the reactor and open all of the chains at the same moment. It was a two-person job and did not have a partner. He reached the access panel beneath the containment chamber. It was hidden behind a false wall that had been placed there during the station's construction. Used a code he had obtained from the rebels to open the panel. Inside were the main systems that controlled the chains. He studied the systems carefully. Each chain had a release mechanism. Each mechanism had a circuit that connected to the master control. If he could bypass the master control, he could activate all the releases at once. It was theoretically possible. In practice, it meant dismantling systems that were designed to be tamper-proof. It meant that if he made a single mistake, the entire system would lock down and alert station security. Began to work. His hands shook slightly as he disconnected the first circuit. He reminded himself that he had studied this. He knew what he was doing. He had to believe that. The work took hours. He worked slowly and carefully, making sure that each connection was perfect. Around him, the station continued its normal operations. People moved through corridors above him. Guards walked past the containment chamber. Nobody knew that the most important person on station was working in the darkness beneath their feet. As dawn approached, made the final connection. The bypass was complete. All of the chains were now ready to be opened simultaneously. All he had to do was trigger the release mechanism, and the dragon would be free. But he could not do it yet. The timing had to be perfect. He needed time to reach the dragon to prepare for what came next. He needed a distraction to draw security away from this area. That distraction was about to arrive. Made his way back to his quarters. He had arranged to meet there. When he arrived, she was waiting for him, sitting on his bed with her hands folded in her lap. "You have been spending too much time in the maintenance tunnels," she said without preamble. "I have been monitoring your movements. I know what you are planning." Close the door quietly behind him. "Then you know what needs to happen." "I know that you are planning to break containment on a creature that the Galactic Council considers to be the most dangerous being in known space," said. "I know that if you do this, you will be hunted for the rest of your life. I know that the Council will execute you if they capture you." "Yes," said simply. Stood up, she looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. Then she said something that changed everything. "I will help you." Felt something shift inside his chest. "You do not have to do this. This is my choice. You still have your life here. You still have your career." "My career is a lie," said. "Every day I work in this facility, I am complicit in an injustice. Every day I pretend that the systems here are correct and just. I am tired of pretending." She walked to the window of his quarters. The station spread out below them, a massive structure of metal and light. "The dragon is dying," continued. "I have reviewed the medical data. The chains are slowly killing it. In 5 years, maybe 10, the creature will be dead. The Galactic Council will have achieved what it wanted. The threat will be eliminated not through combat or justice, but through slow torture." Did not speak, he waited. "I will create a false alarm in the medical sector," said. "It will be a serious alarm. It will draw all of the security personnel away from the lower levels. You will have 20 minutes. That is how long it will take them to realize the alarm is false." 20 minutes, repeated. "That is not enough time." "It is all I can give you," said. She turned to face him. "And then I will have to run as well, because they will know it was me who created the false alarm. My life on this station is ending today. I need you to understand that. I am not being noble or heroic. I am simply choosing to stop being part of something evil." Stepped forward and took her hand. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," said. "We still have to succeed, and the dragon has to survive. If we do this and the dragon dies anyway, then we have sacrificed everything for nothing." That night visited the containment chamber one last time before the escape. He approached the alarm began at 400 hours. Triggered it from the medical sector, a critical warning of a containment breach in the quarantine ward. The alert was severe enough that all security personnel were diverted from the lower levels in seconds. The station shifted into emergency protocol. Every guard, every trained officer, every person with combat training moved toward the medical sector. Heard the alarm from his position in the maintenance tunnels. He checked his chronometer, 20 minutes. That was the window it given him. He pulled the lever that activated the bypass system he had spent 3 nights constructing. Nothing happened for several seconds. Felt his heart racing. What if something was wrong? What if the system had a flaw he had not discovered? Then the reactor beneath the chamber began to power down. The hum that had been constant for 300 years gradually diminished. Heard it clearly. The field that suppressed the dragon's strength was collapsing. He moved quickly through the tunnels toward the chamber. His hands were trembling. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If the guards realized what was happening and returned, everything would fail. Reached the control panel for the chains. He entered the activation code that would trigger all of the releases at once. The panel glowed red, requesting confirmation. Placed his hand on the confirmation pad. Then he pulled the trigger. All 12 chains released at the same moment. The mechanical locks disengaged with a sound like thunder rolling through the chamber. Alarms began to sound throughout the facility. The system had detected the chain releases. Now the entire station knew that a containment breach was in progress. Ran toward the observation window. He had to see it. He had to witness the moment he had planned for so long. The dragon was rising to its feet. The chains that had bound it for 3 centuries were falling away, clattering to the ground like abandoned weapons. The creature stretched its massive wings, extending them to their full span. The wings were 30 meters across, covered in scales that suddenly began to glow with a deep blue light as the suppression field collapsed completely. Roared, the sound was not one of anger or pain. It was the sound of freedom. It was the sound of a being finally released from torture. The roar echoed through every level of station and felt it in his bones. This was a creature that had been mighty, and now it was mighty again. The dragon's eyes found through the window. That golden gaze locked onto him with intensity and intelligence. The dragon walked toward the observation chamber. Its massive claws scraped against the floor. Its movements were controlled and deliberate, not the confused movements of a creature that had been imprisoned so long. This dragon was ancient and wise, and it remembered what it meant to move with power. Heard footsteps running toward him. Guards were returning from the medical sector. They had realized the alarm was false. They had realized that the real emergency was happening in the lower levels. There was no more time for observation. Turned and ran. He sprinted through the maintenance tunnels toward the docking bay. Behind him, he heard guards shouting. Laser fire began to light up the darkness, bolts of energy passing close enough that he felt the heat. He pushed himself harder. His lungs burned. His legs screamed with the effort, but he kept running. The docking bay was still 50 meters ahead. A guard emerged from a side passage directly in front of him. The guard raised his weapon, had a split second to react. He dove to the side and felt the laser bolt pass where his head had been. He continued running without breaking stride. The guard tried to follow but was faster, younger, more desperate. The docking bay entrance was just ahead. Could hear the sound of a transport ship warming up, was already in the pilot's seat. She had abandoned her post in the medical sector and made her way here before the guards could catch her. Burst through the entrance and threw himself toward the ramp of the transport, was already beginning to raise it. He pulled himself inside as the ramp sealed shut behind him. The ship's engines roared to life. "Hold on," shouted from the pilot's seat. The transport lurched forward. Could see the station's docking bay. Security forces were converging on their location, but they were too slow. The ship was already disengaging from the docking clamps. The transport began to move away from station. Thought they had made it. He thought they were going to escape. Then the walls of the docking bay began to collapse. The containment chamber had been directly beneath the bay. When the dragon emerged, it had done so with such power that the structure could not support it. The dragon forced its way upward through multiple levels of the station, moving with the raw strength that had been suppressed for so long. Emerged into the open bay space. The dragon's massive form was suddenly exposed to the vacuum of space, but it did not die. The scales that covered its body formed a protective barrier. The dragon's eyes blazed with golden light as it looked directly at the departing transport ship. The dragon leaped into space. Watched in awe as the ancient beast flew through the vacuum with movements that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The dragon was not using conventional propulsion. It was using something else, something that scientists on 1,000 worlds would have spent centuries trying to understand. The dragon moved like it was swimming through water, pushing against forces that no human could perceive. Caught up with the transport ship easily, the dragon did not attack. Instead, it positioned itself in front of the vessel as if offering to lead the way. Understood. The dragon was choosing a direction. The dragon was choosing where they would go. Looked at with shock on her face. That should not be possible. Nothing can move through space like that. Nothing can breathe in vacuum and survive. Dragons are not nothing, said. Dragons are what the Galactic Council feared most. They feared something that was genuinely greater than the systems they had built. They feared something that could not be controlled or contained. Behind them, station was in chaos. The containment chamber was completely destroyed. Emergency systems were attempting to seal the damage and prevent the station from decompressing. Multiple security vessels were launching from docking bays, moving to intercept the transport. But the dragon was faster, led them away from the station and deeper into space, toward coordinates that only the ancient creature seemed to know. The pursuing security vessels could not match the dragon's speed. They fell farther and farther behind. Stared out at the dragon flying alongside their ship. He felt something shift inside his body. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. But as he watched the dragon move, he felt a connection forming between them. The connection grew stronger. It was not telepathy exactly, but something close to it. Images began to flow from the dragon into his mind. Visions of freedom, visions of ancient worlds, visions of a future that had not dared to imagine. And then a question, clear as day, resonating directly into his consciousness. "Will you stand with me?" Placed his hand against looking at the magnificent creature that had once been a prisoner. He had broken the chains. He had set the dragon free. And now, as the ancient beast offered him a future beyond anything he had known, realized that his own freedom was only just the transport ship entered the coordinates that had provided, and held their breath as the vessel passed through what appeared to be empty space. Then, suddenly, a hidden station became visible. It was smaller than station, but it was clearly functional. Lights glowed in its viewports. Docking bays waited open as if expecting arrivals. Brought the transport down carefully. As the ship settled into the docking bay, felt the powerful presence of the dragon move through his mind. The creature was not boarding the ship. Instead, was positioning itself in the bay outside, waiting. The dragon had been imprisoned in enclosed spaces for 300 years. It would not enter another confined chamber, even one that was meant to be a sanctuary. Understood. They exited the transport into the docking bay. A group of figures waited for them. They were a mix of different species. Recognized humans, several species he could not immediately identify. They all wore the same expression of caution mixed with awe. An older human man stepped forward. His name was James, and he was the station commander. "You freed," he said simply. "Yes," confirmed. "Do you understand what you have done?" James asked. "The Galactic Council is declaring you enemies of the state. They are offering a bounty that would make you the wealthiest fugitives in known space if anyone could collect it. You have committed an act of rebellion that the Council will not forget." "I understand," said. James nodded slowly. "Then welcome to the free worlds. You are not the first to flee Council authority. You will not be the last, but you are the first to bring with you a dragon." Emerged into the docking bay from the outside, moving carefully so as not to damage the station's structure. The ancient creature was magnificent in the full light. Its scales caught the illumination and reflected it back in waves of blue and green. The dragon's wings folded against its body, making the creature smaller than it would have been in open space. But smaller was still enormous. The beast was large enough that it barely fit inside the docking bay. The gathered species took a step back. The dragon looked at each of them in turn, its golden eyes assessing, then knelt down beside. The connection between them opened fully. It was not a sudden thing. It had been growing since the moment first touched the glass between himself and the dragon. Now, as lowered its enormous head near, the connection became complete. Felt the dragon's mind opening to him. He experienced centuries of imprisonment, of suffering, of memories that stretched back thousands of years before the chains. He felt the dragon's intelligence, vast and deep and complex. He felt the dragon's emotions, the relief of freedom mixed with the knowledge of all that had been lost. And then he felt something else. Power, ancient power, power that had been locked away in the dragon's body, suppressed by the chains, slowly accumulating over 3 centuries of captivity. Was transferring that power to not all of it, but enough. Enough to bind them together. Enough to make more than he had been. The process was painful. Felt his body changing, adapting, accepting something that it was not designed to receive. His muscles grew stronger. His senses became sharper. His mind expanded, suddenly aware of things he had never perceived before. He could feel the electromagnetic fields of the station. He could sense the life signs of every being present. He could feel the power of the dragon moving through his own bloodstream like liquid fire. Fell to his knees. His body trembled. He thought he might burst apart from the intensity of what he was experiencing. But gradually the process stabilized. The power integrated into his being. He was no longer purely human, but he was not dragon either. He was something new, something that had never existed before. Opened his eyes. The world looked different. He could see further, perceive more. The connections between things that had been hidden from him before were suddenly obvious. Lifted its head. The dragon's voice spoke directly into his mind, no longer in the low frequency pulses that had communicated from a distance. Now the words were clear. "You are bonded with me now. In times of greatest need, you will be able to access the full measure of my strength. You will be able to move as I move. You will be able to perceive as I perceive. But you will remain yourself. You will remain human. This is a gift, not a curse. Do you accept it?" Looked up at the dragon, at the magnificent creature that had trusted him with its freedom. He felt the power flowing through his veins. He felt the connection between them, a bond that would never break. "I accept it," said. His voice was different now, deeper, carrying overtones that had not been there before. He stood up, his body moved with new strength. His movements were fluid and controlled. Around him, the gathered species watched in silence. Commander James stepped forward again. "What happened to you?" he asked. "The dragon gave me a gift," said. "We are bonded now, we will face what comes together." As if on cue, the station's alarm systems began to sound. An alert appeared on the... Multiple Galactic Council battle cruisers were approaching their location. They had been tracked. They had been found. James looked out at the approaching vessels. They are going to try to destroy this station. They will not tolerate a dragon being free, and they will not tolerate harboring fugitives who freed it. Felt the presence of the dragon beside him. He felt the power that now flowed through his own body. He felt the connection between them, a bond that was stronger than the chains that had held for 300 years. "Then we will defend this station," said calmly, "and we will show the Galactic Council what it means to underestimate a human and a dragon." The dragon roared. The sound echoed through the entire station, a call of defiance that reached across the vast distances of space. The approaching battle cruisers would hear that roar. They would understand that what they were approaching was not a helpless refugee station. It was the beginning of something that would change the balance of power across known space. Walked toward the docking bay exit, ready to face what came next. Followed, massive and magnificent, no longer bound by chains. 6 months had passed since the battle at the Free World Station. The Galactic Council's attempt to destroy the sanctuary had failed, not because the humans and other species there were militarily superior. The Council had more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, but had fought with a precision and intelligence that no military commander had anticipated. The dragon had not killed indiscriminately. Instead, it had disabled ships, driven back attackers, and created a barrier of protection around the station that no Council vessel could penetrate. When the battle was over, the Council forces had retreated, but not out of defeat. They had retreated out of something far more dangerous than military loss. They had retreated out of fear. News of what had happened spread quickly through underground networks across the galaxy. A human had freed an ancient dragon. The dragon had defended refugees. The Galactic Council had been turned back by a creature that was supposed to be imprisoned forever. For the first time, beings under Council control began to question whether that control was absolute. Stood on the observation platform of a new station, much larger than the first one, built by refugees and rebels who had begun to gather in the space beyond Council authority. This station was called Hope, and it had become a beacon for those who were willing to risk everything to live free. Landed beside him with barely a sound. The dragon's movement had become graceful over the months. The ancient creature had adapted to freedom quickly, as if it had been waiting 300 years for the chance to move through space without constraint. The dragon folded its wings against its body and looked out at the stars with. The connection between them had strengthened over time. No longer needed words to communicate with. He could feel the dragon's thoughts, sense its emotions, understand its will. In return, the dragon could access portions of his mind, understanding human perspective in ways that no alien species had ever bothered to comprehend. "I have received another message from," said aloud, knowing that could hear him. "She is assembling evidence, proof of what the Council did to you. She is going to make it public, spread it across every communications network where it cannot be suppressed." Had taken on a mission of her own. While remained with the refugee station as its defender and symbol of hope, had become a voice of truth. She had documented the history of his imprisonment. She had revealed the Council's deception. She had exposed the lies that had justified 3 centuries of torture. The dragon responded with a low rumble that carried meaning, was pleased. The dragon had no desire for revenge, but it wanted the truth to be known. It wanted future generations to understand that the Council could be wrong. Felt a change in the space around them. His senses, enhanced by the dragon's power, detected an incoming vessel. It was not a Council ship. It was a human military transport, recognized the signature immediately. It was Commander David Chase, captain of the Resistance fleet that had begun to grow in the outer regions of known space. The transport docked at the station, made his way to the docking bay to greet the commander. When Chase emerged, he was carrying a data pad with an expression of barely contained excitement. "You need to see this," Chase said without preamble. He activated the data pad, showing the contents. It was a message from a Galactic Council loyalist facility. The message was a surrender notification. The facility's commander was renouncing Council authority and requesting asylum in the free worlds. "This is the 5th one in 2 weeks," Chase said. "Military installations, research facilities, diplomatic outposts. People are leaving the Council. They are coming to us. They have heard about the dragon. They have heard about what happened at station. And they are beginning to believe that the Council is not infallible." Studied the message carefully. Each facility that left the Council was a small victory, but it was not through military conquest. It was through realization. It was through understanding that there was an alternative to submission. Sho said. Chase followed him back to the observation platform. The dragon was still standing there, watching the stars. When Chase saw the creature, he stepped back involuntarily. Even now, 6 months after its liberation, many humans still reacted with fear to the presence of such power. But the dragon did not move aggressively. Instead, looked at Chase with ancient eyes that held no anger, only wisdom. The council is fragmenting, told the dragon. People are beginning to understand the truth. Its messages are reaching them. They are learning that the council's power is not based on justice or righteousness. It is based only on fear and force. Made a sound of acknowledgement. The dragon's voice resonated in its mind with the weight of centuries of suffering and the joy of newfound freedom. The prophecy grows true. I have believed for 1,000 years that one day a human would free not just a dragon but an entire galaxy. I did not expect it to happen in my lifetime. I did not expect to see this day. Felt a deep connection to those words. He had never intended to become a symbol of rebellion. He had only wanted to free one imprisoned being, but that single act had become much larger than himself. It had shown others that the system they lived under could be challenged. It had shown that strength and righteousness did not have to serve the Galactic Council. Over the following weeks, more and more facilities abandoned Council authority. Some left peacefully. Others experienced conflict as Council loyalists tried to prevent their departure. But with each facility that joined the growing coalition of free worlds, the balance of power shifted slightly. The Galactic Council attempted to fight back. They sent more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, but they discovered something that military force could not solve. They discovered that people did not want to be controlled anymore. The presence of the freed dragon, the story of Hayes breaking chains, the evidence of council injustice that was spreading throughout known space, these things had awakened something in beings across 1,000 worlds. It was the desire to be free. 1 year after its liberation, stood with the dragon on the highest point of the Hope Station. Before them stretched an armada of ships. Some were military vessels. Most were transport ships carrying civilians, families, entire communities that had decided to leave council space and build something new. The Galactic Council had issued a final ultimatum: return the dragon to captivity or face total military destruction. The threat was genuine. The Council had mobilized its entire military force to crush the rebellion. But something unexpected had happened. Council military personnel had begun to defect. Soldiers and officers who had realized that they were fighting against justice began to surrender their positions and join the resistance. The Council's military force was fragmenting from within. Looked at with ancient understanding, the dragon spoke directly into his mind, a communication that only he could hear. We stand on the edge of transformation. The chains that bound me were never just physical. They were chains of fear that bound an entire galaxy. You broke those chains. Now beings everywhere are breaking the chains of submission and control. This is what I always hoped would happen. A human would free one dragon, and in doing so, free them all. Placed his hand on the dragon's scaled head. The power that flowed through him felt natural now. It was no longer a foreign thing, but part of who he was. He had become something new, not quite human, not quite dragon. Something that existed between worlds, understanding both perspectives, valuing both kinds of existence. I did not do this alone, said. Did this. Commander Chase did this. All of these people who chose to stand against oppression did this. The dragon rumbled with what might have been laughter. That is why you will succeed where the council will fail. You do not believe in the triumph of the individual. You believe in the power of many working together. That is what makes humanity greater than any military force the council can assemble. You have always been stronger than we knew. You were simply waiting to be freed from your own chains of doubt. Looked out at the armada of ships piloted by humans by 100 different species that had decided to build something better. They were not looking for conquest. They were not looking to replace the Galactic Council with another system of control. They were looking for freedom. They were looking for justice. They were looking for a future where the strongest could choose to protect the weak instead of enslaving them. And at the center of this revolution, moving between the ships with movements that seemed to bend the laws of physics, was the ancient dragon that had been chained for 300 years. The dragon and the human had broken the chains together, and in doing so, they had given an entire galaxy permission to be free. The Galactic Council's age was ending. They did not know it yet, but it was true. They could send more ships, more weapons, more soldiers, but they could not send what truly mattered. They could not send hope. They could not send the belief that a better future was possible. They could not send the understanding that freedom was worth any cost. Those things had come from one human who was willing to risk everything, and one dragon that was willing to forgive those who had imprisoned it. As the Armada moved forward to face the Council's final military assault, stood beside, and the dragon stood beside. They had begun as captor and prisoner. They had become something far greater. They had become symbols of what was possible when courage and compassion joined together. The chains were broken. The age of oppression was ending. And what came next would belong not to the Council, but to all those who were willing to stand together and fight for a future where strength meant something more than domination. The dragon roared as the first battle began, and for the first time that roar was not a sound of rage or despair. It was a sound of hope. It was a sound of freedom echoing across the stars. And the galaxy listened. The age of submission was ending. The age of dragons rising again was beginning. And humanity would not face this new age alone. One human had broken the chains, and in doing so, he had set free more than just a dragon. He had set free the possibility of a future where strength came not from conquest, but from the choice to stand beside those who had been abandoned by a broken system. The approaching council vessels would learn this soon enough. They would learn what true power looked like when it was guided by compassion rather than domination. As and emerged onto the station's outer platform to face the incoming cruisers, realized something that the Galactic Council had never understood. The dragon had never been the real threat. The threat was always what would happen if that dragon was freed by someone who understood the meaning of justice. The battle was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. "Yes," he whispered, "I will stand with you." The dragon roared in space, a sound that no human should have been able to hear, but heard it clearly. The dragon understood. They were bound now, the human and the creature that the galaxy had tried to destroy. And their journey was only just beginning. The observation window and looked down at. The dragon was awake, as if it knew something was going to happen. Placed his hand against the glass again. The dragon rose slowly to its feet. The chains rattled with the movement. The creature's golden eye fixed on, and again he felt that deep frequency pulse vibrate through his bones. This time the message was clearer. The dragon was ready. The dragon had been ready for 300 years. It was only waiting for someone to have the courage to open the door. Pulled his hand away from the glass. He looked at the chains, at the technological restraints that had bound this magnificent creature for so long. "Tomorrow," whispered, "tomorrow I will set you free." The dragon made a sound that might have been hope, and turned away from the window, walking toward whatever future awaited him on the other side of broken chains. "No," said, "I need to help it, and I will." His hand fell away from his arm. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing through the corridor. Remained at the window, his hand pressed against the glass. The dragon's eye watched him. The chains glowed red in the darkness, and for the first time in 15 years, Hayes knew exactly what he needed to do. The age of silence was ending. The age of standing still was over. It was time to break the chains.